Kong activists are pushing U.S. lawmakers to pass a bill that would interfere with Hong Kong's affairs, but on what grounds? And what is China's role in the global fight against climate change and promoting sustainable development? I spoke to the Undersecretary General for the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs to find out. Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. A Hong Kong activist who is on parole by the name of Joshua Wan and a Hong Kong-based Canadian singer, former pop star by the name of Dennis Ho, together with another activist, have attended a U.S. congressional hearing on Tuesday to call on American lawmakers to pass a so-called Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. The bill could require annual reviews over Hong Kong's special status and sanctions, if necessary, over those who undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs strongly urged the U.S. on Thursday to earnestly respect China's sovereignty and stop interfering in whatever form in Hong Kong affairs. Can these activists' view represent the majority of the Hong Kong people? And what kind of effect will this bill, if passed, have on Sino-US ties? Joining me for the discussion in the Beijing studio is Witman Hung, Deputy from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, and from Melbourne, Australia, Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Before we go into the discussion, let's first listen to what the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to say to the U.S.'s reintroduction of this so-called Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act.
We strongly urge the U.S. to abide by international law and basic norms governing international relations, earnestly respect China's sovereignty, stop interfering in whatever form in Hong Kong affairs, stop pushing the relevant act on Hong Kong, stop endorsing violent and radical forces in Hong Kong and separatist forces for Hong Kong independence, and stop instigating words and deeds undermining the stability and prosperity of the Hong Kong SAR.
So a little bit of background to those who doesn't know about this bill, because there is a Hong Kong Policy Act which was passed in 1992, which guarantees that Hong Kong has a special territory status so that it enjoys a different kind of customs status when doing trade with the United States. That's different from the trade relationship between the United States and Chinese mainland. Now, some U.S. Congress people introduced a so-called Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act last year, but it was not really passed, and then they reintroduced this act this June when this so-called extradition bill was very much in the spotlight. So, Mr. Hung, help us understand the situation here. What exactly is about this act that make the Chinese government so strongly reactive? And, you know, they said a lot of words here about why this bill must not be passed and what kind of consequence this is going to have on China-U.S. relations.
I think this is, you know, Hong Kong is part of China, and this is purely a Chinese internal affairs. Now, having American Congress to pass an act, has passed a bill to interfere with internal, you know, matters of China, is really against, you know, international diplomatic ethics and, you know, standards. Imagined during the Occupy Wall Street era, if the Chinese Congress passed a bill saying, okay, American human rights bill, and then we urge them not to suppress the you know, Occupy Wall Street protesters, and also will ban any policemen who arrest those people from entering China. How would the Americans think?
Some of the things that's written in this bill, for instance, really clearly is very much like what you said, Mr. Hung, just now. For instance, in the segment of Statement of Policy, it says that this bill supports the establishment of a genuine democratic option to freely and fairly nominate and elect the Chief Executive of Hong Kong, and the establishment by 2020 of open and direct democratic elections for all members of the Hong Kong Legislative Council. Basically, they're saying saying, you know, you have to do your election towards this direction, and according to these principles, otherwise we could put you on the sanction, or we're going to revoke your status that you have been enjoying for a while. So, Mr. Hung, exactly how is the election decided according to Hong Kong's law and you know, the arrangement that's been established before Hong Kong was handed over to China?
Well, there are two things. The joint declaration did not specify how the elections will be done. They just say it can be elected or negotiated. And then I think the basic law actually says that in the long run, I didn't specify when, but in the long run, we should go for a universally elected chief executive and also the legislatures. Mm-hmm. Now, a few years back, in 2014, the 31st of August, actually, the People's Congress actually passed a notice specifying the requirement that they would try to push for a universal, election for all Hong Kong people to be able to cast one man, one vote on the chief executive. But there were certain requirements. There is a selection committee, basically, there's a nomination committee which should then nominate the candidates.
But let's not go into the details here. The important thing is how Hong Kong is going to elect its leader, and how the legislative council members are going to be elected will be how Hong Kong people decide, right? Exactly. According to Hong Kong's basic law.
There is not just the basic law, but also the local legislative procedures. I mean, in 2014, the Hong Kong Local Legislative Council had vote down then the proposed universal election proposal by the Hong Kong government.
Anyway, I think it is another whole different discussion to talk about elections, but let's just look at the kind of idea, Einar, as well. Let me go to you. The kind of idea that the U.S. want to pass this law to kind of pressure China to manage the affairs of Hong Kong, or to pressure the Hong Kong SAR government to manage its affairs in a certain way. And clearly, in some of the things that's written in the statement of policy, it's against the basic law, what's written in the basic law in Hong Kong. Einar.
Yeah, it's clearly outrageous. You can't have other countries dictating what happens in something that's not there. That's why it's called sovereignty. It's the ability to govern yourself. Let's say that China said, look, we think you should have a communist party and that you should run your affairs according to our model because we've been very successful, and if you don't do this, we'll impose some sort of economic sanctions. It would fall like a lead balloon. I mean, it's really very strange that any country would feel that they have the right to do that. But that's the problem that we have right now. American exceptionalism, this idea that there's only one legitimate end for all governments, this liberal democratic capitalism, has become a kind of battle cry for a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. And right now you have 20 senators and 30 congressmen who are sponsoring this bill.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say how much support eventually it's going to get so that it can pass the simple majority mark for this bill to be presented to the U.S. President for signature. But just to clarify this point, I mean, one of the things that they argue is that Hong Kong's economy has been eroded. Hong Kong freedom has been eroded, so they have to, on an annual basis, reassess whether Hong Kong deserves the kind of special territory treatment that the U.S. is giving to Hong Kong. But on the other hand, for many consecutive years, Hong Kong has been rated the world's freest economy, and just this past month, I believe, the Fraser Institute in Canada also ranked Hong Kong's economy the world's #1. So on what grounds are these U.S. congressmen, are these activists who testify before the U.S. Congressional Committee saying Beijing's erosion has led to the detriment of Hong Kong's interests? Mr. Hung.
Yeah, I have no idea, how they arrived at that. Even I live in Hong Kong. I do not see any deterioration in terms of the freedom. In terms, if you want to give an example, freedom of expression, we have people on the street every weekend throwing bricks and petrol bombs and to express their views. I mean, I personally, I'm actually very against that, but even that is happening in Hong Kong. if you look at the other measurements, you just say first in the Institute, the Freedom Economics, we have been, I think, 23 consecutive years being #1 in the world. So I really do not see any deterioration in terms of freedom and other things.
And I want to talk about this kind of process as well, because it's not the first time that we see this kind of hearing. And how representative are these people's views to the great majority of the Hong Kong people? Right now we have 3 people, right? One is this opposition activist who actually has had a very much pro-independence inclination in the past, let's say, although he went to Germany and said Hong Kong is part of China, but then he had very much secessionist opinions in the past. And then we have this Canadian pop singer who's very much against China, and then we have another some kind of a delegate representing the higher education. How representative are their views of the Hong Kong people's views?
Well, definitely not at all. If you look at, I think if you ask the majority of Hong Kong people, they may have different views in terms, for example, the extradition bill itself. But to urge a foreign government to put sanction on Hong Kong, I think it is against the will of most of Hong Kong people. Okay, so definitely, and then if you talk to a lot of people, of course, you do see people, waving the American flag in protests. I've seen them on TV, but those are a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what about the great majority of the people at this kind of hearing? You don't have the other side. I mean, at least I didn't see the other side. Are there any possibility that the other voices could be heard also before this bill is put to vote?
I wonder.
Maybe, or Einar, your view here?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to hear much on there. There have been a number of gatherings, people showing up. They're waving the Chinese flag. They're saying they don't approve of this, but they're being drowned out by the international press, who has taken this up as a cause célèbre. They think that this is about democracy, although none of the 3 people you mentioned have ever been elected to anything. It's simply they are self-appointed leaders of a mob that they say has no leaders.
And it's very, one of the statements that was made by one of the people who testified before the Congress said that the United States is the only superpower that can contain China, so please come and we ask your help to, come and try to contain China. That's why we need support from the U.S. government. And then another said that Beijing should not have it both ways, reaping all the economic benefit of Hong Kong standing in the world amid the erosion of our freedom. Mr. Hung, what do you say to these kind of comments?
Well, first of all, what erosion in freedom? I do not see anyone. And then also, asking a foreign country to contain your own country is just beyond anyone's imagination. I do not know this lady. I've seen her video, but I have no idea why she speaks like that. And if you ask any ordinary person in Hong Kong on the street, whether it's from a university or any people, they would not ask that. I am very, very surprised, actually.
Yeah, the exact word is, this is a crisis of values and systems. We need to contain the Communist Party of China. America, you're the only superpower that can really try to contain China. That's why we need support from the U.S. government. This amounts, actually, as you said, Mr. Hung, to traitor rhetoric in the eyes of many Chinese people. Einar, are they sending the right messages to the U.S. congressmen and to the U.S. General public who might be watching this?
No, they're not, but the problem is this is an election season, and we're leading up to one, a very important one, and China bashing seems to be the latest a continuing craze for that. So it doesn't really matter what the reality is. Most people do not understand much about Hong Kong in the U.S. They're really not, they couldn't even tell you where it is. But they're wading in on this because of this kind of popularized notion that democracy is being crushed in Hong Kong. Quite the opposite.
All right, we have to leave it there. We'll try to talk more about it in the near future. Many thanks to Witman Hung and Einar Tangen.